No, Camille, I had to remember. I was Camille now. Took a slow sip of my champagne. My eyes scanned the room, a self-satisfied smirk playing on my lips as I spotted her. Vanessa, my former best friend, looking like a startled gazelle, was desperately trying to weave her way through the glittering crowd towards me. Towards Camille, the hottest new designer in the city. She had no idea who I really was. Then I saw it, nestled against her skin, winking under the mood lighting. My necklace. The one my mother had given me. The one Vanessa had borrowed right before everything. A jolt, sharp and cold, shot through me. Suddenly, I wasn't in this chic, minimalist space anymore. I was back at that god-awful gala 3 years ago. The cheap fabric of my thrift shop dress, a dress I'd poured weeks into redesigning, felt rough against my skin. Vanessa's mocking laughter echoed in my ears, her hand, sticky with something red, smearing across my creation. "Oops, darling," she'd sneered, her eyes glinting with malice. "Looks like your rags couldn't handle a real party." The others, Ryan, Melissa, even my own father, had stood by, their faces a mixture of amusement and disdain. The memory of their faces, the shame, the searing pain of betrayal, it all came rushing back, culminating in the screech of tires, the blinding headlights, and the rain-slicked asphalt rushing up to meet me. I blinked, the present snapping back into focus. Vanessa was closer now, a hopeful, ingratiating smile plastered on her face. I moved, as if by accident, my hand faltering. Champagne, cold and bubbly, cascaded down the front of Vanessa's silk gown. Her smile froze. "Sorry about that," I whispered, my voice a silken echo of her own words from that night. Her eyes widened, confusion warring with a dawning, horrified recognition. Something in my gaze, perhaps? A flicker of the Eliza she'd destroyed. It was a start. Back then, I was just Eliza, a scholarship kid with a sketchbook full of dreams and a needle always in hand. Fashion design was my air, my water. I lived it, breathed it. But my world, however bright with passion, was populated by sharks and designer clothing. Vanessa, who I'd once considered a sister, was the first to show her teeth. We were both students, but where I had talent, she had connections and a cruel streak. She'd accidentally spill coffee on my final sketches, misplace my rarest fabrics. Rumors would slither through the design department that I was copying established designers, that my ideas weren't original, all courtesy of Vanessa. It was death by 1,000 cuts, each one chipping away at my confidence, making me doubt the one thing I knew I was good at. Then there was Ryan. Oh, Ryan. He was charming, handsome, and knew all the right people. I'd fallen for him, hard and fast, blinded by what I thought was genuine affection. He'd seemed so supportive of my ambitions. Turns out, he was just dating down for a bit of middle-class cred, a quirky artist girlfriend to show off until someone better, someone richer, came along. That someone was Vanessa. I found out the way one always does in these melodramas, walking in on them. The public humiliation he orchestrated afterward, dismissing me as a clingy, social-climbing nobody at a party full of our peers, still burned a hole in my memory. He'd picked Vanessa, and together they'd made sure I knew my place. And Melissa, my half-sister, the golden child. While I inherited my mother's creativity and a modest trust fund she'd painstakingly saved, Melissa got our father's attention and his blank checks. She had a passing interest in fashion, mostly as a way to garner Daddy's approval. My designs, the ones I'd foolishly shown her in moments of shared, or so I thought, sisterly confidence, started appearing in her portfolio, slightly altered, but undeniably mine. She'd present them to our father, James, who would lavish praise on her supposed ingenuity. My attempts to claim my work were met with his usual dismissive wave. "Eliza, dear, Melissa has the eye. You're enthusiastic." James, my father, a wealthy businessman with a portfolio of companies, including a floundering fashion house he'd acquired on a whim. He'd always favored Melissa, his daughter with his society wife, over me, the product of a youthful affair he'd rather forget. He saw my passion for design as a quaint hobby, something to keep me occupied, while Melissa's dabblings were the mark of a future industry leader. He never invested in my talent, only in my downfall by his indifference. Now, 3 years after my supposed death, here I was, Camille, a name whispered with reverence in the fashion world. I'd chosen my middle name, a blank slate. I'd even subtly altered my appearance, a sharper haircut, a different way of carrying myself, a wardrobe that screamed quiet power instead of hopeful artistry. It was Fashion Week, and I was attending a high-profile industry event, not as a guest, but as a celebrated designer whose show was the talk of the town. And there they were, the four of them, clustered together like a coven of well-dressed vipers. Vanessa clinging to Ryan's arm, Melissa looking stressed, and James, my father, looking older, more careworn than I remembered. The air around them was thick, a suffocating miasma of expensive perfumes. Vanessa's cloying floral, Melissa's desperate attempt at sophistication with something too mature, Ryan's overtly masculine scent, and my father's old money spice, all mingling with the almost palpable scent of their anxiety. I moved closer, positioning myself behind a ridiculously large floral arrangement, close enough to overhear their hushed, frantic conversation. They were talking about Moreau, my father's fashion house. It was failing, badly. The investors are threatening to pull out completely after the last disastrous collection, James was saying, his voice tight. We need something fresh, something groundbreaking, or we're finished. Melissa wrung her hands. Daddy, I'm trying, but the inspiration just isn't there. The team is demoralized. Ryan, ever the opportunist, chimed in. What you need is new blood, James. A designer who can create some buzz. Vanessa predictably added, someone like that new designer, Camille. Her stuff is everywhere. If only we could get someone like her. I had to stifle a bitter laugh. Oh, if only. The memory of the gala, the one that preceded my death, flashed again, clearer this time. My dress. It had been a vintage find, a forgotten silk sheath from a thrift shop. I'd spent weeks on it, carefully recutting it, dyeing the fabric a deep sapphire, and painstakingly embroidering it with tiny silver beads in a celestial pattern I'd designed myself. It was my Cinderella moment, I'd thought. My chance to show them all, to show my father what I could do with next to nothing. Their laughter, the sticky mess of a spilled drink, deliberately aimed by Vanessa, that stained and ruined the delicate silk. The snide remarks from Ryan about my charity shop chic. Melissa's feigned sympathy that barely masked her smirk. My father's disappointed sigh, as if I were the embarrassment. The shame had been a physical weight, crushing me. I'd fled the gala, tears blinding me, the city lights blurring into streaks in the pouring rain. I remember running, not looking, just needing to escape. Then the sudden, blinding glare of headlights, the terrifying screech of tires on wet asphalt, a colossal impact, and then nothing. Blackness. I'd woken up not in a hospital, but in my old, cramped student apartment. The date on my phone read 3 years earlier. 3 years before the gala, before the accident. 3 years to the day I'd first met Ryan, when Vanessa was still my friend, when Melissa hadn't yet started openly plagiarizing my work on a grand scale. I had all my memories, all the knowledge of their betrayals, all the pain. But I also had a second chance. A chance to do it all differently. The initial shock had been overwhelming. Was I mad? Was this a dream? But the reality of it settled in, cold and hard. I wasn't Eliza, the naive victim anymore. The accident, my death, my inexplicable return, it had forged something new in me, something resilient, something calculating. Revenge wasn't just a desire. It was a blueprint. I would build my own empire, brick by painful brick. I would become everything they said I couldn't be, and I would watch them, watch their world crumble. As I stood there behind the flowers, listening to their desperate plotting, a cool sense of calm settled over me. My plan was already in motion. The Camille label was my first major offensive. Its success was growing, a quiet storm gathering force. My phone buzzed in my clutch, a text message. Eliza, is that you? Heard you might be back in town. It's Melissa. We need to talk. Coffee? They didn't know I was Camille. They didn't know I was already several steps ahead. A slow smile spread across my face. Oh, we would talk. The coffee shop Melissa chose was one of those aggressively trendy places, all polished concrete and uncomfortable minimalist stools. The air smelled of burnt coffee beans and a hint of desperation. Perhaps my own projection, I mused. Melissa was already there, a saccharine smile plastered on her face that didn't quite reach her eyes. The bitterness of the espresso I ordered was a welcome contrast to her forced sweetness. Eliza, you look well, she said, her gaze flicking over me, undoubtedly cataloging the designer handbag, the subtle but expensive cut of my jacket, trying to assess if I was still the same gullible girl she could manipulate. Melissa, I replied, my voice even, betraying nothing. It's been a while. Too long, she gushed. I was so worried when you just disappeared. We all were. Liar. I remembered the relief, thinly veiled on her face when my father had finally, reluctantly called off the search for me after a few fruitless weeks. We made small talk. She spoke of her challenges at Moreau, the pressure she was under. I listened, offered vague, sympathetic noises. Then, the inevitable pivot. You know, I've been trying to get back into my own design work on the side, she said, her voice laced with false modesty. It's so hard to find fresh inspiration. She then steered the conversation towards my own supposed break from fashion. What have you been up to? Still sketching, I hope? You always had such unique ideas. This was it, the angle. I feigned a hesitant blush. Oh, a little, here and there, nothing serious. I'd love to see if you wouldn't mind, she pressed, her eyes a little too bright. Maybe we could even collaborate, help each other out. I reluctantly pulled out my sketchbook. Not my sketchbook, of course. This one was special, curated just for this meeting. As I excused myself to use the restroom, I watched her in the reflection of a nearby window. Her eyes darted around, then, quick as a viper, her phone was out, snapping pictures of the pages I'd left open. Classic Melissa. When I returned, I pretended not to notice the slight tremor in her hands, the way she couldn't quite meet my eye. I acted touched by her interest, by her sudden desire to reconnect. It's so good to see you're still passionate about design, Melissa. Maybe we can get together again soon and really brainstorm. She left with promises to call, her phone clutched tightly in her hand, no doubt already planning how to present my new designs to Daddy. The designs she'd just stolen were, of course, utterly ridiculous. They were theatrical, unwearable, a collection of stylistic cul-de-sacs I'd doodled as a private joke. They looked superficially impressive in sketch form, but any competent designer would see the structural flaws, the impractical fabric choices, the sheer unmarketability of them. Producing them would be a financial black hole. With Melissa's predictable treachery dealt with for now, I focused on my real work. My mother's inheritance, which I'd managed to access after my reappearance, and a lot of legal wrangling explaining my 3-year absence as an amnesiac episode abroad, wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Enough to rent a tiny, slightly damp studio apartment in a less fashionable part of town. Enough for fabrics for a secondhand industrial sewing machine. I started my label, Camille. No fanfare, no announcements. Just me, my sketches, and endless nights fueled by cheap coffee and an unshakable resolve. The scratch of my pencil on paper, the hum of the sewing machine, these were the sounds of my quiet war. My fingers cramped, my back ached, but every stitch was a step closer to my goal. This first collection was mine, truly mine. Clean lines, innovative, sustainable fabrics, designs that spoke of resilience and quiet strength. I kept tabs on Melissa, of course. It wasn't hard. She was predictable. A few weeks later, I saw paparazzi shots of her leaving a meeting with James. A smug look on her face, a portfolio case clutched in her hand. My decoy portfolio. Soon after, industry news buzzed. Moreau was fast-tracking a revolutionary new collection by their rising star Melissa Sterling for a major upcoming showcase. James, desperate for a win, was pouring resources into it. My father, blinded by his favoritism and his own lack of design acumen, was walking right into the trap I'd set. The night of the Moreau showcase was a media circus. I watched the live stream from my tiny apartment, a rare glass of wine in my hand. The first model stumbled onto the runway. The dress, a concoction of stiff, unyielding plastics and bizarrely placed feathers, looked like a melted chandelier. The next was worse, a gown so heavily weighted with misplaced architectural elements that the model could barely move. Gasps, not of admiration, but of disbelief, rippled through the audience. By the third look, a asymmetrical nightmare in clashing neons, people were openly snickering. The models, professionals though they were, looked pained, struggling to navigate the runway in designs that were clearly impractical, if not downright dangerous. The fashion critics were merciless. A bewildering display of incompetence, one headline screamed the next day. Moreau's descent into farce, declared another. James's key investors, the ones he'd been trying so desperately to appease, pulled out within the week. Moreau was officially on life support. Melissa called me, her voice choked with tears. They hate it, Eliza. They hate me. My career is over. Father, he's beyond furious. I let her sob for a moment, savoring the sound. Then, my voice calm, almost gentle, I asked, Melissa, did you really think stealing would make you talented? Silence on the other end of the line. Then a choked gasp, and she hung up. The first domino had fallen. My phone rang again almost immediately, an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Eliza, is that you? It's Ryan. Ryan Parker, remember me? His voice, that smooth, confident baritone that had once made my heart flutter, now just sounded hollow. Listen, I know we had our issues, but I heard you were back. And I've been following some new designers. I came across this incredible new label, Camille. Her work. It's astonishing, and it reminded me of you, of your sketches. I always knew you had it in you, Eliza. I always believed in your talent. Always believed in me? The audacity. I almost laughed. He had no idea Camille was me. He was just sniffing around, looking for his next opportunity. This was going to be even more satisfying than I thought. Ryan wanted to meet. Just to talk, he'd said on the phone, his voice oozing a practiced sincerity that now made my skin crawl. Catch up? And maybe discuss a potential opportunity. I have a feeling we could do great things together, Eliza. You and me. He still didn't connect me to Camille, the rising star designer. He just saw Eliza, the girl he'd discarded, possibly back in town and, in his mind, ripe for exploitation if she still held a torch for him or her design dreams. We met at a sleek, overpriced wine bar, the kind of place he used to take me when he wanted to impress me with his sophistication, before he'd decided I wasn't worth the effort. He looked the same. Handsome, impeccably dressed, that familiar cologne hitting me as he leaned in for an awkward hug. The scent, once so intoxicating, now just made me feel vaguely nauseous. It smelled of betrayal and cheap theatrics. You look amazing, Eliza, he said, his eyes doing a quick, appreciative scan. Time has been very good to you. I offered a small, enigmatic smile. I've been busy. He launched into his pitch, disguised as friendly concern. He'd heard about Melissa's disaster at Moreau, tut-tutting sympathetically. He claimed he'd broken things off with Vanessa ages ago. We just wanted different things, you know? A lie, I was fairly certain, as I'd seen them photographed together at an event just last month. Then he leaned in, lowering his voice conspiratorially. Listen, Eliza, I've been thinking. I'm looking to invest in new talent, real talent. And I've been incredibly impressed by this new designer, Camille. Her aesthetic is incredible, revolutionary even. But she's new, probably needs capital, connections, things I can provide. He paused, gauging my reaction. Your work always had that same spark, that same unique vision. I'm serious, Eliza. I'm looking to get back into the fashion game, but on the investment side. If you're designing again, I want in. Or if you know this Camille, maybe you could make an introduction? He genuinely didn't recognize me. The subtle changes to my appearance, the new confidence, the professional polish. I was a ghost to him, a memory he was trying to reshape to his advantage. Or perhaps he just saw what he wanted to see. A path to Camille, the designer whose buzz was palpable. I let him talk, appearing to listen intently, nodding occasionally. I let him lay out his vision. He wanted to invest in my promising new label, assuming I had one, or failing that, use me as a stepping stone to Camille. The cool glass of wine in my hand was a steady anchor as I maintained my composure, playing the part of the flattered, slightly overwhelmed old flame. That's a very generous offer, Ryan, I said, feigning surprise. I am working on some things. And yes, I've heard of Camille. Her work is remarkable. So, you'll think about it? My investment, I mean? He pressed. Draw up a proposal. Let me see what you're working on. Or, if you're in touch with Camille, tell her Ryan Parker is very interested in talking. Yeah, but I'll need to see a formal business proposal from you first, Ryan, I said, my voice all business. To understand your terms, your partners. His eyes lit up. Of course, consider it done. I'll have it to you by the end of the week. He was practically preening. He thought he had me. His proposal arrived as promised, detailed and full of impressive financial jargon. It also, crucially, listed his key financial partners, a small consortium of private equity investors he'd managed to cultivate. That was the real prize. I didn't need Ryan. I needed his backers. My own business plan for Camille was already meticulously prepared. It was aggressive, innovative, and highlighted our early successes, our commitment to sustainability, a huge selling point, and our clear vision for global expansion. I bypassed Ryan entirely. I reached out to his partners directly, presenting myself as Camille, the founder and designer. I laid out my strategy, my numbers, my passion. I offered them a better deal, a more direct route to a brand that was already gaining traction, untainted by Ryan's somewhat tarnished reputation as a dilettante. It took a few weeks of tense negotiations, presentations, and due diligence. I worked with legitimate industry mentors I'd sought out, older, established figures who saw the potential in Camille and were willing to guide a fresh talent. They helped me refine my pitch, navigate the complexities of investment. My debut collection, the one I'd toiled over in my tiny studio, was creating a genuine buzz. Bloggers were writing about it, stylists were requesting pieces for shoots, Camille was being hailed for its innovative cuts, its ethical sourcing, its modern, understated elegance. The call came on a rainy Tuesday morning. Ryan's partners were in. They were investing heavily in Camille, and they were dropping Ryan. They'd seen my potential, my drive, and they'd seen Ryan for what he was, a middleman, an unnecessary complication. The public fallout for Ryan was swift, though mostly confined to the financial pages and industry gossip. His fashion fund was dead before it even launched. He found out, as people often do in these situations, through a curt email from his former partners. He showed up at my studio, the real Camille studio, now a much larger, brighter space thanks to the new investment. He was unannounced, his hair disheveled, his usual confident swagger gone. He looked like he hadn't slept. They told me, he said, his voice raw. They told me they're backing you. Camille. He was alternating between begging and threatening. How could you do this, Eliza? After everything, I offered you a chance. I stayed calm, letting him rant. When he finally paused for breath, I looked him straight in the eye. You offered me a chance, Ryan. Or were you hoping to ride Camille's coattails just like you tried to use everyone else? You talk about after everything. Let's talk about that. Do you remember how you treated me when I was just Eliza, the girl with a sketchbook and no connections? When I was, in your words, nobody. He stared at me, his face slowly draining of color. The name Eliza, spoken by me in this studio, the home of Camille, finally clicked. Recognition flickered in his eyes, then horror. Eliza, he whispered, recoiling as if he'd seen a ghost. But you changed everything about yourself, your hair, your style, you're Camille? Not everything, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Just the parts that let people like you take advantage. He stumbled back speechless for once. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a desperate, humiliated understanding. He turned and left without another word. The second domino. A week later, an official-looking envelope arrived. An invitation. Camille was invited to compete in the prestigious Future of Fashion competition, a major event that could launch a designer onto the international stage. My heart did a little flip. This was it. This was the platform I needed. Then I saw the list of other finalists. And there, among the names, was Vanessa Moreau, representing her father's ailing company, no doubt in a last-ditch effort to save it. Our paths were destined to cross again, sooner than I'd thought, this time on my terms. The atmosphere at the Future of Fashion competition was electric, a potent cocktail of ambition, stress, and the sharp, distinct scent of possibility. Backstage, in the warren of workspaces assigned to each designer, it was organized chaos. Bolts of fabric, dress forms draped in half-finished creations, and the constant whir of sewing machines filled the air. I was in my zone, meticulously checking the drape of a silk charmeuse gown when I felt eyes on me. I looked up. Vanessa. She was hovering near my cutting table, a pair of fabric scissors glinting in her hand. A little too close to a swath of delicate, hand-painted silk that was the centerpiece of my collection. Her expression was a familiar blend of arrogance and thinly veiled insecurity. She didn't recognize me as Eliza, of course. To her, I was just Camille, the formidable competitor everyone was talking about, the one standing between her and a desperately needed win. "That's a unique piece," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness as she gestured vaguely towards my nearly completed gown. "Shame if anything were to happen to it. Accidents happen in high-pressure situations like this." The implication was clear. The sharp scent of these fabric scissors, the way she toyed with them, sent a chill down my spine. Not of fear, but of cold fury. This was who she was. This was who she'd always been. "Indeed they do," I replied, my voice carefully neutral. I met her gaze, holding it until she looked away. A flicker of something unease in her eyes. "Just so you know," she continued, recovering her bravado, "I have connections. Serious connections. Some people are just destined to win these things, and some are destined to make up the numbers." She gave a brittle little laugh and sauntered back to her own disastrously cluttered workspace. I smiled faintly. She thought she was threatening me. She had no idea I was documenting everything. Her little veiled threat, her proximity to my materials, my discreetly placed microcamera, a habit I'd developed for moments just like this, had caught it all. I appeared passive, perhaps even a little intimidated. I let her think she'd scored a point. "Competition is tough," I'd murmured, almost apologetically, as she walked away. "May the best designer win." She smirked. "Oh, she will." My secret counter move was already in play. I made a quiet, anonymous report to the competition officials, complete with the video footage. I didn't want her disqualified outright. Where would be the fun in that? But a formal warning, a black mark against her name, would suffice for now. It would also ensure they kept a closer eye on her. Vanessa was duly reprimanded, looking shocked and indignant that anyone would dare accuse her of unsporting behavior. It clearly unnerved her, which was a small, satisfying victory in itself. Then, I put her out of my mind and focused on perfecting my collection. Each piece was a testament to my journey, the strength I'd found, the beauty I could create from a place of resilience, not bitterness. The fabrics were innovative, sustainable, the silhouettes modern and empowering. This wasn't just about winning. It was about showing the world and myself who I truly was as a designer. The night of the runway show arrived. The thrumming bass of the music vibrated through the floorboards, a rhythmic pulse that matched my own racing heartbeat. Backstage was a whirlwind of models, stylists, makeup artists, and anxious designers. I took a deep breath, centering myself. This was my moment. Vanessa's collection went first. It was predictable, over-designed, reliant on flashy gimmicks rather than genuine innovation. It felt like a desperate attempt to capture trends rather than set them. There was polite, scattered applause, and then it was time for Camille. As my first model stepped onto the runway, a hush fell over the audience. The gown, the one Vanessa had eyed with malicious intent, flowed like liquid moonlight. Each subsequent piece built on the last, a cohesive narrative of strength, elegance, and quiet revolution. When the final model walked, wearing a breathtakingly sculptural coat made from recycled textiles, the silence erupted. A standing ovation. Tears pricked my eyes. I had done it. Backstage, amidst the chaos of congratulations and flashing cameras, Vanessa approached me. Her face was pale, her earlier arrogance completely gone, replaced by a raw, ugly desperation. She knew she'd lost. "Camille," she began, her voice trembling. "Your collection. It's incredible, truly. Listen, Moreau, my father's company. It's not doing well. A win tonight would have meant everything. But even a collaboration, if you'd consider working with us." Before I could respond, a figure emerged from the shadows. My father, James. He looked older, more tired than I'd ever seen him, but there was a spark of something I hadn't witnessed in years directed at me, pride. "Camille," he said, his voice thick with emotion as he approached me, bypassing Vanessa completely. "Your work. It's visionary, absolutely visionary." He turned to the assembled press, who were now buzzing with interest. "And I'm thrilled to announce that I am the primary investor in the Camille label. I saw the talent from the beginning. I knew she was destined for greatness." He beamed, placing a proprietary hand on my shoulder. He had no idea. He was lauding Camille, the stranger, the industry darling. He still didn't see Eliza, his daughter. A slow smile spread across my face. This was the moment I'd been working towards, the culmination of 3 years of silent, painstaking planning. "Thank you, James," I said, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. Vanessa looked utterly bewildered by this new development. "It's true," I continued, turning to address him directly and then the wider audience. "James Sterling is indeed a significant investor in Camille." I paused for effect. Though he wasn't aware of it until recently, and he certainly didn't know that the Camille he was investing in, through several layers of shell companies and financial advisors I carefully guided his fund towards, was actually his own daughter. The stunned silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the distant, muffled applause still echoing from the runway for my collection. Vanessa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My father's smile froze, his face draining of all color as my words sank in. The proprietary hand on my shoulder dropped as if it had been burned. "Eliza," he choked out, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes, father," I said, my gaze unwavering. "You never believed in Eliza. You dismissed her, ignored her talent, let others tear her down. So I made you believe in Camille. I made you invest in the stranger you thought was a sure thing, while the daughter you ignored built this entire enterprise under your nose with your unwitting financial backing." The realization hit him like a physical blow. He'd been funding my rise, my triumph, even as his own company, helmed by the daughter he had championed, was collapsing under the weight of its own mediocrity and Melissa's stolen, flawed designs. The winner of the Future of Fashion competition was announced moments later. It was me, Camille. The prize included a significant grant and, more importantly, international distribution deals that would catapult my brand onto the global stage. As I accepted the award, the flashes of cameras blinding me, I saw Vanessa. She was crying, not the crocodile tears of earlier, but genuine broken sobs. She approached me later, after the press had thinned, her makeup smudged, her expensive dress looking rumpled. "Camille, Eliza," she stammered. "Congratulations, you deserve it. My family, they're cutting me off. After this, after Moreau's failures, I have nothing, no prospects. Is there any chance, a job, anything?" The irony was almost too perfect. The fashion world exploded with the news. "Camille is Eliza Sterling," the headline screamed. The story of the prodigy designer who had seemingly vanished only to reappear under a new identity and conquer the industry was irresistible. My mystique, my brand, grew exponentially. James, Melissa, and Vanessa became footnotes in my story, figures of ridicule and industry humiliation. Moreau Designs quietly filed for bankruptcy a few months later. A year passed, a year of relentless work, of building Camille into a global force, a year of seeing my dreams, the ones they had all tried to crush, come to vibrant, spectacular life. Then came the invitation to the grand opening of my flagship Camille store in the heart of the city's most exclusive shopping district. And as if drawn by some invisible karmic thread, all 3 of them showed up. James, Melissa, and Vanessa, standing together near the entrance, looking hesitant, wanting to talk. The final act, it seemed, was about to begin. The flagship store was everything I'd ever dreamed of, and more. My name, Camille, was lit in elegant, understated lights above the grand entrance. Inside, champagne flowed, and the air buzzed with the murmur of admiring voices. Clients, critics, industry power players all gathered to celebrate my success. The satisfying pop of champagne corks was like a soundtrack to my victory. I felt a sense of calm, of arrival. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Then I saw them, lingering awkwardly by the door, a stark contrast to the glittering crowd. James approached first alone. He'd aged considerably in the past year, the assured arrogance replaced by a hesitant, almost pleading look. He attempted a smile. "Eliza, Camille," he began, his voice huskier than I remembered. "The store looks magnificent, truly. I always knew you had this in you, that talent. I was just pushing you, trying to make you stronger, more resilient." I looked at him, this man who was my father but had never truly been a parent. The excuses, even now, were pathetic. "Were you, father?" I asked, my voice devoid of the anger that had once consumed me. Now there was just a quiet finality. "Or were you simply blind to what was right in front of you?" I didn't wait for an answer. "I think it's best if you leave." He opened his mouth to protest, but a subtle glance from me towards my head of security, a formidable but discreet woman named Anya, was all it took. Anya materialized by his side. "Mr. Sterling, if you'll come with me, please." He looked from her to me, a flicker of his old anger quickly doused by defeat. He allowed himself to be escorted out without further protest. One down, Melissa was next. She approached me with tears already streaming down her face, her mascara leaving black trails on her cheeks. She looked diminished. The designer clothes she wore seemed ill-fitting, her confidence completely eroded. "Eliza!" she sobbed, her hands trembling as she reached out as if to clutch my arm. I subtly sidestepped. "Daddy, he's cut me off completely. After Moreau went bankrupt, I have nothing. No one will hire me." Her voice cracked. "I know I was awful to you. I was jealous, so incredibly jealous of your talent. I always admired you, even when I was being horrible. Please, Eliza, a job, any job. I'll sweep the floors, I'll answer phones. I need a chance to prove I can be better." I studied her, this half-sister who had tried to build her career on the foundations of my stolen work. The desperation was real, I could see that. But so was the ingrained pattern of deceit. "Melissa," I said, my voice gentle but firm, "the difference between us was never just about talent. It was about work. I worked for everything I have. You tried to steal it. There are no shortcuts to true success or to self-respect. Perhaps it's time you tried earning something for once." Her face crumpled. "But how?" "That," I said, "is something you need to figure out for yourself. I didn't offer her a job. I didn't offer her false hope. I simply offered her the truth." She turned and stumbled away, lost in the glittering crowd that no longer saw her. Two down. Finally, Vanessa and Ryan approached together. They looked like a mismatched pair of drowned rats, humbled and stripped of their former gloss. Ryan's expensive suit looked rumpled. Vanessa's dress, though stylish, lacked its usual confident flair. They stood before me, a united front of desperation. "Eliza," Vanessa began, her voice barely above a whisper, We wanted to apologize for everything, for the dress, for the bullying, for not seeing your worth. We were awful to you. Inexcusably awful." Ryan nodded, his gaze fixed on the floor. "She's right, Eliza. We were young, stupid, cruel. But people can change. We've changed. We've learned our lesson. The hard way." He looked up then, a flicker of the old opportunist in his eyes, though heavily diluted with fear. Maybe there's a way we can all move forward? A collaboration? Your designs are, well, we still have some contacts. It could benefit us all." The air around us grew still. Nearby conversations paused as people, sensing drama, turned to watch. The weight of their collective silence pressed in. All eyes were on me. This was it, the moment they begged for forgiveness, for a lifeline, the moment I could finally deliver the crushing blow they so richly deserved. I looked at them, at Vanessa's pleading eyes, at Ryan's hopeful, nervous expression. And I felt nothing. No triumph, no vindictive pleasure. Just a vast, empty space where the anger used to be. My response, when it came, was quiet, but it resonated through the sudden hush of the room. No, just that one word. Vanessa flinched as if struck. Ryan's face fell. I appreciate the apology, I continued, my voice still calm, still level. Or at least, I appreciate the sentiment behind it, if it's genuine. But I'm not interested in revenge anymore. The truth is, I simply don't need you. Not your apologies, not your collaborations, not your presence in my life. I met their eyes, one by one. Your apologies mean nothing to me because you mean nothing to me. But we can make amends, Vanessa cried, her voice rising in panic. We can prove we're different. Ryan chimed in. Don't be like this, Eliza. Don't be so cold. They were starting to cause a scene. The carefully curated elegance of my opening was being threatened by their desperation. I gave another subtle signal to Anya. She and another discreet security guard moved smoothly to their sides. I think it's time for you both to leave, I said, my voice final. You can't just dismiss us like this, Ryan protested, his voice growing louder as security began to gently but firmly escort them towards the exit. Vanessa was openly weeping now. The industry elites surrounding us watched the entire exchange, their expressions a mixture of surprise and grudging admiration. My refusal to engage, my calm dismissal of my former tormentors, spoke volumes. It cemented my reputation not just as a brilliant designer, but as a woman of immense strength and integrity. After they were gone and the buzz of the party slowly returned to normal, a young woman approached me hesitantly. She was probably in her early 20s, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and nervousness. She was wearing a simple but beautifully reworked dress, the kind of thrift shop find I myself would have coveted in my student days, transformed by clever cutting and delicate, unusual embroidery. Miss Camille, Eliza, she stammered, I just wanted to say your work is the reason I decided to go into fashion. You're an inspiration. I looked at her, at the passion shining in her eyes, at the unique dress she wore with such pride. And in her, I saw a reflection of my younger self. The hope, the raw talent, the quiet determination. For the first time that evening, perhaps for the first time in years, a genuine, unforced smile spread across my face. Thank you, I said, my voice warm. What's your name? It's Maya, she replied, blushing. Maya, I said. That's a beautiful dress. Did you redesign it yourself? She nodded shyly. Yes. I love finding old things and giving them new life. I have an internship program starting next month, I said, making the decision on the spot. I think you'd be a perfect fit if you're interested. Her eyes widened, then filled with tears. But these were tears of joy. Interested? I would be honored. This felt right. This felt like the true victory. Not the downfall of my enemies, but the uplifting of new talent. Later that night, after the last guest had departed and the store was quiet, I stood alone in the main showroom, surrounded by my creations. The path here had been paved with pain and betrayal, but I had walked it. I had not only survived, I had triumphed. It was time, I decided, for a vacation. My first real vacation since being reborn. A real one, where I didn't have to look over my shoulder or plot my next move. It was time to just be. 1 year later. The sun warmed my skin, and a gentle breeze carrying the scent of salt and wild thyme from the rugged cliffs of Santorini ruffled the pages of my sketchbook. I wasn't sketching for a collection, not really. Just lines and shapes inspired by the curve of the caldera, the whitewashed walls gleaming gold in the late afternoon light. This was for pleasure, a luxury I was still getting used to. My phone, lying on the sun-warmed stone beside my lounger, buzzed. It was my assistant, Chloe, back in New York. Just a quick update, Camille, or should I start practicing Eliza again? She teased. I smiled. Eliza is good, Chloe. I think it's time. Okay, Eliza, it is. The Camille for Everyone affordable line is exceeding all projections. We're practically selling out worldwide as soon as it hits the stores. And that piece on your mentorship program just ran in Vogue. They highlighted Maya. She's doing incredibly well, by the way. Her capsule collection for the diffusion line is brilliant. That's wonderful news, Chloe. She deserves it. I felt a quiet surge of pride. The scholarship fund I'd established for underprivileged fashion students was also thriving, already helping a new generation find their footing. After the call, I leaned back, gazing out at the endless expanse of the Aegean Sea. My journey had been a strange, twisted one. Revenge had been the fuel for so long, the driving force behind every decision, every stitch. But somewhere along the way, as Camille grew, and as I began to heal, the burning need for retribution had faded, replaced by something quieter, more fulfilling. The simple joy of creation, of building something meaningful, of helping others. The cool, crisp sheets of my luxury villa felt like a caress against my skin as I stretched out later that evening, truly relaxed for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. I'd made the decision. When I returned to New York, I would legally change my name back to Eliza. Camille had served her purpose. She had been my shield, my armor, my weapon. But now, it was time to integrate both identities to be whole. Eliza Camille Sterling. It had a certain ring to it. I idly scrolled through industry news on my tablet. A small article caught my eye. Sterling Holdings, former parent company of Moreau Designs, files for final bankruptcy. A brief mention of James Sterling's diminished fortunes. Another piece, a gossip column tidbit, Melissa Sterling, once touted as a design heiress, reportedly working in high-end retail on Madison Avenue. And a surprisingly human interest story about a small, bespoke tailoring and alterations business in Brooklyn, started by Vanessa Moreau and Ryan Parker, apparently finding a niche doing quality repair work. They were described as humbled but surviving. I felt nothing. A mild, detached curiosity, perhaps. The emotional charge was gone. They no longer had any power over me. Their fates were their own, no longer intertwined with mine. A few days later, exploring a small, sun-drenched village clinging to the cliffs, I wandered into a tiny art gallery. The artist, a man named Nikos, with kind eyes and hands stained with paint and clay, struck up a conversation. He knew nothing about the fashion world, nothing of Camille or Eliza Sterling, the designer. He just saw a woman admiring his work. He helped me up a set of steep stone steps to a viewpoint overlooking the sea, his rough, warm hand steadying mine. The texture of his skin against mine was grounding, real. "You have a story, I think," he said, his English accented but gentle, as we watched the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues. A big one. I considered what to tell him. The drama, the betrayals, the rebirth, the revenge. It all felt like a lifetime ago, a different person. I smiled. "I do," I said, "but I think I'd rather start with this chapter and perhaps talk about the next one." I decided to share only the present and the possibilities of the future, leaving the shadows of the past where they belonged. On my last evening in Santorini, I sat on my balcony, the sky a canopy of stars. My sketchbook lay open in my lap. A new collection was taking shape, inspired not by pain or the desire for retribution, but by the beauty of rebirth, the grace of second chances, the quiet strength found in healing. It was inspired by the golden light of Santorini, by the resilience of the human spirit, by joy. I closed my eyes for a moment, a soft breeze cooling my face. I whispered a silent thank you to my past self, the broken girl who had found the strength to survive, to fight, to rebuild. She had been the architect of this new life, even in her darkest moments. With a contented sigh, I closed my sketchbook. I turned away from the fading light and walked back into the warm glow of my villa towards the new life I had built, entirely on my own terms. A life filled not with the ghosts of the past, but with the promise of a bright, self-made future.